What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have our areas of interest 93 and 94L over here quickly organizing and developing. We're going to be talking a lot about those extensively. We also have Gabrielle heading towards the Azores Islands as hurricane warnings are now in effect for those islands over there. So we're going to want to talk a little bit about that as well. But our main discussion for today will be on 93 and 94L, as those do pose a threat to the east coast of the United States, as well as much of the greater Antilles. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Starting off, we have Gabrielle for you guys right here. We're going to go ahead and briefly talk about this right here. And then we're going to go ahead and get to the invests. So here's the situation. Gabrielle is now a high-end Category 2 hurricane with winds of 110 miles per hour, minimum central pressure of 962 millibars, and it's moving east-northeast at 25 miles per hour. So it is chugging to head towards the Azores Islands. It's about 1,200 miles away from there at this current point. Hurricane warning is in effect for all of the Azores right here, ladies and gentlemen. So that is quite the situation we are looking at right here. Hurricane force winds extend outward 45 miles from the center. Tropical storm force winds extend outward 150 miles from the center. So that's definitely something that we're going to want to pay attention to. And we're going to go ahead and show you the cone as well, taking a quick gander at that. Look at this. This is going to mainly be moving more so due east for quite some time. And then as it heads towards the Azores Islands, it's going to start transitioning into an extratropical cyclone. And then it's going to either make landfall or a very close pass to this island chain before becoming an extratropical cyclone and heading towards Iberia, which is Portugal, Spain, potentially Morocco is in the cone as well. So definitely an interesting situation panning out. If you're in Western Europe, you're absolutely going to want to pay attention to this, follow your local agencies, and we'll continue to track Gabrielle as long as it's a hurricane until it gets to the Azores Islands, and then we will continue. Then we will talk about a few other things as well as that becomes an extratropical cyclone, and that's out of the NHC's purview. But ultimately, a very interesting and a very rare scenario you see right here, especially for the Azores Islands getting hurricane warnings like this. So we're definitely going to want to pay attention going forward. And looking at the forecast intensity, it is expected to become a 90-mile-per-hour hurricane as it moves through the Azores Islands. Then it's expected to transition into an extratropical cyclone at hurricane intensity, mind you, and then start to slowly weaken and eventually dissipate as it heads towards Europe. So that's the latest and greatest we have with Gabrielle. I know we made it pretty quick. We're going to go ahead and mainly talk about, for today, these two areas of interest for you guys. This is Invest 93L and Invest 94L. This would be your future Herald and your future Imelda, I believe those two would be. So that would be our two named storms that we're paying attention to moving forward, and both have very high probabilities of development as they've continued to organize and they have continued to show that, hey, you're going to want to pay attention to these, and we could be seeing a very rare scenario with these two systems, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But first, let's get to 93L. Shower and thunderstorm activity associated with an elongated area of low pressure located several hundred miles east of the Leeward Islands continues to show signs of organization. Environmental conditions are forecast to be favorable for further development, and a tropical depression is likely to form later today or Thursday while the system moves west-northwestward to northwestward into the western tropical Atlantic, well north of the Leeward Islands. Additional information can be found in the high seas forecast by the NWS, 90% chance of formation in the next 48 hours and 7 days, so that is definitely something to watch out for as well. It's increasingly likely that this area right here, 93L, will develop first, and then 94L will develop in the next couple of days after that. Probably in the next, I'd say, after 3 days or so, that 94L would develop. It needs to get through some land interaction and a few other things that would need to take into consideration, but that's what we have going on. With 94L, this is the situation. It's actually quite a bit of a long discussion that we're going to go ahead and go over, so here we go. A tropical wave over the northeastern Caribbean Sea is producing disorganized showers and thunderstorms. This wave is expected to move west-northwestward at 15 to 20 miles per hour, spreading heavy rainfall and gusty winds into Puerto Rico and for the Virgin Islands today, and then across the Dominican Republic beginning tonight. This system is then expected to slow down and turn northwestward when it reaches the southwestern Atlantic late this week rather. Environmental conditions are forecast to be more conducive for development in a few days, and a tropical depression is likely to form when the disturbance is in the vicinity of the Bahamas. Interests in the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, the Turks and Caicos, and the Bahamas should monitor the progress of this system. And Air Force Hurricane Hunter is scheduled to perform a system survey this afternoon to gather data from the surrounding environment if necessary. So we are looking at a 30% chance of development in the next 48 hours, 80% chance in the next 7 days. So this is more of a long-term threat that we are going to want to pay attention to, and that we're going to have to keep an update on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, because there is a few new interesting developments that I think we need to take into account and we need to pay attention to as well. And some people behind the scenes in Storms United have been talking about that, and we will go ahead and brief you on that in just a second. But starting off with this right here, we're going to go ahead and go to our satellite imagery, starting off with Invest 93L in the central Atlantic for you guys right here. Here is Invest 93L. As you can see, it's really it is getting its act together, but it is kind of more of a north-south in terms of its convection right here, than more circular right now, which I do think is kind of interesting. I definitely can see that area of rotation right there. I can definitely see the center of it trying to get its act together right about here. I would say it's right about here. So ultimately, that's going to be something to pay attention to. And if we see some more convection kind of fire off near the center of that circulation right there where my cursor is, we could definitely see this system becoming a tropical system tonight, in my opinion, although I think at this current point it needs to take some more time to consolidate and do all of that. But if we do see something unexpected, I would say tonight would probably be the most likely scenario where this develops. If not, it's going to take a little bit more time and then get its act together tomorrow. So that's what we're looking at right there in terms of Invest 93L. In terms of the environment that we are looking at ahead of it, where it's at right now is actually in a pretty decent pocket of moist air, and it's producing convection too, which is also helping with its tropical development. So you have the system kind of consolidating, and you do have the system kind of battling this dry air. This outflow is kind of protecting as a shield to keep the dry air away from the system right now. We're definitely going to want to pay attention to that as well. I'm not 100% sure if there's a little bit of shear affiliated with this or not. We'll have to pay attention to it. But ultimately, this system continues to consolidate. It's in a pretty favorable environment for development, and I would not be surprised if we see a named storm coming up in the next 24 hours. So we're definitely going to want to pay attention to this as well. And models are really picking up on this too, and they're really wanting to be quite aggressive with 93L. Mainly wants it to stay out to sea, but it could influence the track of 94L, and we could see a very rare scenario, which is a Fujiwara effect potentially in the Atlantic. It's more common in the Pacific than it is in the Atlantic, but ultimately we could see a scenario of that happening, but we'll have to pay attention to that moving forward. In terms of what's going on with Invest 94L, which is currently over parts of Puerto Rico and in parts of the Caribbean, there's an interesting situation that is playing out over there, and let's go ahead and get a zoomed out view of it. My apologies. Let's go ahead and get a zoomed view of this. So here's 94L for you guys right here. You're definitely seeing a lot more convection firing up over here in parts of Puerto Rico. Right here, definitely want to pay attention to that as well. Looking for your center of circulation, definitely looking at that right here. We noticed it a little bit earlier. It looked like it was a little bit further to the south than what we were originally anticipating. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up right here, taking a quick gander at this. This is from Brian Maxwell here on Twitter. He was kind of talking about this, and I wanted to go ahead and pull this up. This actually came up right on my desk. This was a little bit earlier today. Actually, this was last night, as a matter of fact. So here's what we got for you guys right here. 94L appears to have made up its mind in regards to where the center wants to form. Using the satellite loop at higher speed, we can easily see where the center is forming. regardless of being further south than originally expected, it looks like the it looks like the future steering currents should, hopefully, if things go as planned, keep this away from a direct landfall in Florida. We'll have to wait and see what happens after that with all the Fujiwara and the cutoff low and whatnot trough. It's going to be a complicated forecast for sure. So looking at this right here, we definitely saw this a little bit further to the south than what we were originally anticipating. Does that mean tropical development is not going to happen? No, that's not what he's saying at all. Matter of fact, what we're seeing is kind of the initialization point is a little bit further to the south right here. And if you look at it right here, at least compared to what we saw previously with the forecast, it would actually, the further south track would actually kind of keep it further to the west when it started to make that turn, and then potentially be more of a risk towards the Bahamas and potentially Florida. But we don't exactly know where this is going to end up. Do I think the East Coast should be watching this? 1,000%, yes. But am I saying that we're looking at a direct landfall at one place or another? No. The reason I'm not as confident now, and a lot of people are not as confident, is because we have 93L that's kind of going to be hovering around and causing the Fujiwara effect. And basically what a Fujiwara effect does is, if you have two identically intense systems, they kind of do a little bit of a dance and a rotation around each other, and it kind of really messes up the forecast track by a considerable margin. And maybe a system that potentially could head to Florida gets affected by the Fujiwara effect and then just rams right into the Bahamas instead. It's one of those scenarios that we're going to have to wait and see moving forward, but by and large, we are still looking at tropical development with this. As soon as it gets to the southwestern Atlantic, that's when it's going to be go time, and that's probably going to be in the next, I'd say, 2 to 3 days or so. So we're definitely going to want to pay attention to that. And if you're in the Bahamas, you're absolutely going to want to watch this, and you're absolutely going to want to prepare for this, because this system may not be doing much right now. Yes, it's producing convection. Yes, it's producing some rainstorms in parts of the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, the Lesser Antilles. Yes, it's doing all of that stuff. But ultimately, what you're noticing with this is going to be developing as it's approaching land, and we could see a sneaky scenario where this system really gets its act together as it's approaching land, and then just rapidly intensifies as it starts to bring a lot of impacts to a lot of people on those islands. So that is a concern that we have, and the conditions there definitely do support that kind of development as well. Matter of fact, just looking at the moisture alone, it has plenty of moisture in front of it to kind of keep it going. You have plenty of moisture from convection, from upper level lows, for all of that stuff, and you just have, as long as the system produces convection, once it moves into a more moist environment, it's going to be very good to go. You are looking at 29 to 30 degrees Celsius water temperatures, which is about 84 to 86 degree Fahrenheit water temperatures for those of you that live in Florida and Puerto Rico and want to pay attention to this, as well as all the other U.S. territories that could be affected too. And you're also looking at low wind shear with this as well, not just with this area, but the other area of interest too, 93L, our future H and I named storms. Now, the main question I have with this is, what exactly is going to happen? How strong are they going to get? And what kind of impacts could we get as a result? Because this is going to be a very weird and very rare forecast right here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, and I'll go ahead and show you why I say that. Here is the European model for you right here. European has 93L developing into Harold right here, organizing pretty quickly into a tropical storm, but it mainly stalls out over parts of like north of the Lesser Antilles right here, which I do think is kind of interesting as a tropical storm. It's expected to develop, as a matter of fact, by tonight actually, and then get its act together as a tropical storm by tomorrow or Friday, excuse me. And then potentially get up to hurricane strength if the European is correct by Saturday afternoon. And then this area of interest over here in about 3 days starts to organize, starts to develop over here near the Lesser Antilles. And it does take its time to get its act together, but still tropical storm strength by the time we are at 4 days out, which is on September 28th. And that would be our I named storm right there. Remember, we've talked about the I curse and how that may come into play this year. And ultimately, you have these systems kind of getting their act together right here, really organizing as well. And then just before you did have this low right here getting pulled into this low right here, and then you see it get yanked out right here, kind of like really messing up a lot of their tracks right there. So this is going to be a very difficult forecast to deal with. Are we going to see impacts along the East Coast? We're not 100% sure yet, but they should absolutely be watching out for this because let's say that this system stays a bit further to the east than what we previously thought. You're going to have a scenario where maybe this this western tropical system crashes into the Carolinas over here, and that's something that we're going to want to pay attention to. And another thing I need to note is the European isn't even taking into consideration the further south shift that we've noticed on observations. So that's also another thing that we're going to want to pay attention to. But we are looking at a very interesting scenario right here, and that is what your European is pulling up for. GFS, I'll show you the 0Z, then I'll show you the 12Z. GFS actually wants these systems to both develop at the same time and then produce a Fujiwara effect and then merge with each other and then start to kind of consolidate by the time it gets out to sea right there. But then it becomes an extratropical cyclone. It becomes one heck of a mess. So that's something to watch as well. But then if we go ahead and show you the 12Z, it wants 93L to develop pretty quickly and actually strengthen into a Category 2 hurricane by 3 days out right here. And as for the area of interest over the Bahamas, it has it actually merging into this area of into this hurricane right here as the part of the Fujiwara effect as well. That's what the GFS is going for with that scenario. So that's definitely a possibility right there. That's why it's going to be so tricky for this to forecast. Looking at the Canadian run, Canadian has has 93L developing first, then 94L getting its act together, and actually further to the west in the central Bahamas right here as a strong low pressure system, likely a hurricane at this current point. Then it starts to do its Fujiwara effect, and then both of these systems kind of chase each other out into the Atlantic right here. So that's also another scenario right here. We're seeing 3 different scenarios of what could play out. And then the Icon run is also kind of interesting, having this 93L develop first, then 94L develop in the western Bahamas, and then 94L quickly intensifies pretty quickly, and then it starts to move actually further to the south in the Bahamas right there, and then the Fujiwara effect just continues to take hold right here. And the Icon really has the system, like the Icon has been the most aggressive model, I will say, having both these systems in as major hurricanes. Do I think that's going to happen? I'm not 100% sure, but what I will say is that these are all scenarios, and this is what that we're paying attention to. And I personally do not trust the Icon because of its intensity at this current point. In terms of the track, that's a little bit of a tricky forecast because you have to take into account steering currents, you have to take into account how strong the other system gets, and you have to take into account just how much further to the west 93L will ultimately go. And another thing we need to take into account too is their speeds. 93L, at least according to the National Hurricane Center, they don't actually give a speed on this, but 94L, they're having it move at 15 to 20 miles per hour further to the northwest, which that's actually a relatively fast speed, all things considered right here. So that's definitely something to watch out for as well. If 94L can move faster than 93L and it can move further to the west, the Fujiwara effect wouldn't have as much of an effect on 94L's track, primarily because of the distance. The further the way the distance is, the lesser off the Fujiwara effect will take place. They need to get within a few hundred miles close to each other in order for it to fully kick in. But the further away 94L can get away from 93L, the less the Fujiwara effect will take place and the more certain our forecast will be. But it depends on the speed of both of these systems, at least in terms of their travel speed. It depends on how quickly 93L intensifies, which a lot of hurricane runs are having this intensify pretty quickly, actually. And then how organized 94L gets and where it kind of pops into the southwestern Atlantic, whether it comes off the Dominican Republic, whether it comes off of Cuba, and then enters the Bahamas. Those are all factors that we're going to want to pay attention to. and we will keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us some questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. We'd really appreciate it, having you guys on there to help out with streams and other behind-the-scenes activities as well. But with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.